If you can dream it, then you can create it with Wedi's integrated modular shower system. This radius shower with an offset drain will be constructed with a 3-foot by 3-foot shower base using base extensions to continue the pre-sloped base in 2 directions. Before nesting your components together, ensure that all seams have a Z-notch when laying out your assembly. You never want to join the extensions of any Wedi shower base components unless you create a Z-notch. This will ensure a proper seal. Here, we'll show you how to create a Z-notch. We're using a small skill saw with a carbide blade. First, you want to set the blade depth to 1 inch. Cut the underside of the extension a 1/2 inch back from the edge. Now, cut the foam edge 1 inch up from the bottom, 1/2 inch deep. This same Z-notch will need to be cut to join the extension parts to each other. If you don't have a skill saw, you can use a razor knife and straight edge. Once they're tightly fit together, you'll want to draw the perimeter lines and the appropriate dimension for your desired layout. In this application, we'll need to mark the radius corner to fit the radius framed wall. Now, you're ready to cut the components. Use a handsaw or skill saw for the straight cuts, and when you get to the radius corner, it becomes necessary to use a jigsaw. Or if you don't have a jigsaw, you can use a small handsaw with a thin blade. Now, lay out all the parts in an open area on the floor so that you can access all the edges at once to apply the 1/2 by 1/2 inch notch at all the perimeters. Readjust your saw blade depth to 1/2 inch and cut the top side of all the straight pan perimeters 1/2 inch from the edges. Now you can roll the saw on its edge and use the floor as a straight edge, since many saw blades are set back 1 inch from the guide. Again, if you don't have a saw, you can always use a razor knife. Here, we're using a router to notch the radius corner. You can also cut this channel using a razor knife. Always do a dry fit in the shower space to ensure a proper fit. Now, apply modified thin set to the floor, making sure to have complete coverage to the whole area using a 1/4 by 1/4 inch or 3/8 by 1/4 inch notch trowel. Be sure that you generously apply the thin set to the complete area all the way to the side walls and up to the drain area. You'll also need to apply modified thin set to the underside of the shower base. Trowel the thin set in straight channels in one direction toward the open entry side of the base. This allows a pathway for the air to escape. Assembling the drain body on the base will first require applying Wedi sealant to the lip on the drain hub on the top of the shower base, as demonstrated. Unscrew the outer and inner parts of the assembly drain. Insert the main portion of the drain body onto the top side of the base. Now turn the base over. Fit the rubber washer to the underside of the drain hub. Next is the fiber washer, and now you need to screw the large threaded nut to the bottom of the hub. Make sure to firmly tighten this down with both hands. The base is now ready to fit into place. press the base into place by stomping on it. The following diagram shows how to install the drain and gasket correctly. You'll notice in the second diagram that if the drain pipe is too low, you cannot correctly compress and seal the gasket. Take your time to ensure doing this right. You should now be ready to insert the rubber drain gasket. The double bevel edge should be facing up. The gasket is going to be inserted between the 2-inch drain pipe and the inner drain assembly. This is a snug fit, and you need to fully press the gasket into place so the top side of the rubber gasket is below or flush to the top of the drain pipe. It's imperative that the gasket is not sitting above the 2-inch drain pipe. To set the gasket, twist the threaded nut into place and use the tightening tool provided with a screwdriver to firmly tighten and compress the gasket into place, creating the proper seal. Weigh down the first base part and continue to apply thin set to the area under the extensions. You will now need to apply modified thin set where the extensions are to be installed. Don't forget to apply thin set to the underside of each of the pan extensions. The next crucial step is to generously and continuously apply sealant to the edge of the base so that the modular parts are fully sealed with all connecting components when joined. Place the corner extension into place, then apply more sealant to the joint between the next extensions being fit into place. Make sure that no thin set is in the area where sealant will be joining all the parts, because thin set in this area will allow moisture to wick through and leak. Finish these joints off by applying another top surface joint of sealant and putty knife flat. This step can be done after completion of assembly, as you might accidentally walk through the uncured sealant. The wallboard will need to have relief cuts made in order for you to bend it to conform to the radius framed wall. You want to cut a 3/16 inch deep notch every 1 to 2 inches, depending on how tight the radius is. This can be done with a table saw or a skill saw. You do not want to use a razor knife to do this step because you need the width of the saw blade to remove the material, creating a void which enables the board to bend easily. Apply sealant to the 1/2 inch notch at the perimeter of the base, and you want to fill this notch 3/4 to completely full. When making these relief cuts in the board, you're not cutting all the way through the core membrane, so the board is still watertight. However, these channels are pathways where water can run down, escaping at the seam between the wallboard and the pan. To avoid this, apply sealant to the bottom edge where it'll be joined to the Wedi shower base. Generously apply sealant to the board in this area and use a putty knife to press the sealant into the channels. Now, the prepared radius board is ready to bend and fit into place, compressing it firmly into the 1/2 by 1/2 inch notch of the pan. Once positioned, apply washer tabs starting 1 foot up from the base and continuing every 1 foot on the vertical studs. You'll drive the screw into place far enough that you will be compressing the board a bit, so the washer tab is slightly indented from the surface of the wallboard. Wedi wallboards are light and easy to work with. They can be easily cut with a razor knife. Make sure to cut all the way through the board to ensure you have a clean edge for a better seal when assembling. All vertical seams between the wallboard should be centered on a stud. Apply a continuous 1/2 inch bead of Wedi sealant to all edges before placing the next sheet and continue to screw the fasteners into place. Place the washers over the seam between the boards to encourage a flush transition, using fewer fasteners. Once your wallboards are installed, it's a good idea to trowel back the sealant from seams. The sealant starts to cure in about 30 to 60 minutes, depending on room temperature. Always remember, the most crucial step with installing the Wedi shower system is to always apply sealant generously to the joints before joining any parts. Surface-applied joints will not work. You always want to apply more sealant to all inside corners of the complete shower system and trowel flat. This will act as a surface flashing, in addition to the depth of seal between all parts. Use all excess sealant to cover all fasteners, or apply with your sealant gun. Make sure all fasteners are completely covered, including the complete washer tab, so no metal is exposed. We're now constructing a radius bench with our 2-inch building panel. You'll need to relief cut the board on one side by running a skill saw blade 1 3/4 inch deep, every inch or less, depending on how tight you need to bend the Wedi board. We're marking the angle needed at the jambs so the panel is cut to fit. Place the bench in the appropriate location and mark the area where you intend the front of the panel to be installed. Apply sealant generously to the full edges at the jambs and sill of the front bench panel. Fully compress the curved panel into place firmly to gain good adhesion and seal. Surface apply another bead of sealant to the bottom edge and trowel flat. Use your scrap material cut to the same height as the front panel and glue these to the radius back wall, acting as a ledge support for the bench top. Cut your final bench top with the appropriate radius to fit the back wall. It's easiest to dry fit the bench top to scribe the exact shape for your front cut. Now, glue the bench top into place. Press the front edge down to create the appropriate top slope for water runoff. In essence, you're using the sealant as a wet shim to create the needed slope. Finally, apply your sealant to all seams and trowel flat. Now you're ready to cut the full foam curb to fit around the perimeter of the shower pan assembly. Using a handsaw, cut the curb to the appropriate length and angles as needed. Do a dry fit to ensure everything fits tightly. You'll want to use thin set to adhere the curb to the floor while making sure to not get any thin set where you will be applying sealant between the pan edge and the curb. Apply a generous amount of sealant to the edge of the shower base, as well as the wallboard where the curb will be installed. Apply thin set to the underside of the curb, then fit into place. Fully compress the curb into place, making sure that the joints are tight and the curb is square to the floor. Apply more sealant to the mitered edge of the curb where the two curb parts meet. Finally, apply the surface bead to the inside corners of the curb against the base and the wallboard, then trowel flat. We recommend applying mesh tape and modified thin set to strengthen the radius board that was relief cut to bend on the radius wall. When cured, this will become rigid and will be easier to work with when you install the surface tile. As you see, Wedi is rarely challenged with even the most custom of shower configurations.